Birdie stands alone at her infant daughter's tiny casket, shattered by grief and betrayal. Her phone buzzes with social media notifications showing her parents celebrating at her golden child brother's pool party. Their text message still burns in her mind. "It's just a baby, Birdie. Your brother's party matters more right now." As she buries her child alone, something inside her hardens. They have no idea what she's about to do. Not revenge, but something that will change their family forever. For as long as I can remember, I lived in my brother Doug's shadow. Being the second child in the Walker family meant watching my parents, Janet and Richard, shower Doug with attention, praise, and support while I fought for scraps of their affection. Doug is 3 years older than me, but the gap in our parents' love felt like a canyon. Growing up in our suburban Atlanta home, every milestone in my life was overshadowed by something Doug did. When I graduated high school with honors, my parents barely noticed because Doug had just landed an entry-level job at a prestigious marketing firm. My college graduation dinner was cut short because Doug needed help moving into his new apartment. The pattern continued throughout my 20s and into my 30s. When I met Troy at 27, I finally found someone who saw me, really saw me. He came from a warm, loving family where each member was valued equally. The contrast with my own family was stark and painful. Troy noticed how my parents treated me at family gatherings, how they would interrupt me to ask Doug about his latest accomplishment or acquisition. After we married, Troy gently suggested I establish healthier boundaries with my family, but years of conditioning made that nearly impossible. "I just want them to love me," I confessed to him one night after another disastrous Sunday dinner, where my parents had spent the evening fawning over Doug's new promotion. "They do love you, Birdie," Troy said, stroking my hair. "They just don't know how to show it equally." But deep down, we both knew that wasn't quite true. Doug knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just passively accepting our parents' favoritism, he actively maintained it. He would call them with emergencies whenever I shared good news. He would subtly undermine my accomplishments with comments like, "That's great that Birdie got that small promotion. My company just gave me a bonus that's probably more than her annual salary." And my parents ate it up, reinforcing their belief that Doug was the successful child while I was just there. When Troy and I decided to start a family at 30, we assumed it would happen quickly, but month after month passed without a pregnancy. Tests revealed I had endometriosis, and conceiving would be difficult. We tried everything tracking ovulation, fertility medications, lifestyle changes. Nothing worked. Meanwhile, Doug bought a new luxury car and my parents helped him with the down payment, despite the fact that he made 6 figures and I was drowning in medical bills. After 3 years of trying, we turned to IVF. The process was brutal physically, emotionally, and financially. We depleted our savings, took out loans, and still, the first 2 rounds failed. I was devastated, but my parents offered little comfort. "Maybe it's not meant to be," my mother said dismissively. "Not everyone needs to have children." The 3rd round of IVF was our last hope. When the doctor called with positive results, I collapsed into Troy's arms, sobbing with joy. We were finally going to have our baby. That weekend, we announced the pregnancy at a family dinner. "That's nice, dear," my mother said before immediately turning to Doug. "Did you tell Birdie about your promotion to vice president?" I bit my tongue so hard it bled. 2 months later, Doug announced he was installing an in-ground swimming pool at his house, a luxury purchase that paled in comparison to creating new life. Yet my parents threw him a groundbreaking party, complete with catered food and champagne. For my pregnancy, I received a single card with a $20 gift certificate to a baby store. Despite my family's indifference, I threw myself into preparing for my baby. Troy and I converted our 2nd bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow since we had decided not to learn the baby's sex. I registered for a baby shower that my friend Laura organized, knowing my mother wouldn't offer. At the shower, attended by friends and Troy's family, my mother made a brief appearance, leaving early because Doug needed help selecting furniture for his pool house. At 20 weeks, we went for the anatomy scan. The ultrasound technician grew quiet halfway through, then left to get the doctor. My heart dropped. "Mrs. Carter," the doctor said gently, using my married name, "I'm seeing some irregularities with your baby's heart." Further testing confirmed our baby girl had a rare congenital heart defect called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. The left side of her heart was severely underdeveloped. She would require multiple surgeries after birth, with no guarantee of survival. "We'll do everything possible," I told Troy, gripping his hand tightly. "I will be everything to her that my parents never were to me." That night, I called my parents to share the diagnosis. My father answered. "Dad, we got some difficult news today," I began, voice shaking. "The baby has a heart condition. It's serious." There was a pause. "That's unfortunate. Have you considered your options?" "My option is to love my daughter and fight for her," I replied coldly. "Well, these things happen. Listen, I need to go. Doug is on the other line about his pool installation issues." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Then something inside me shifted. I placed my hand on my growing belly and made a promise to my daughter. "You will never doubt that you are loved and valued, not for a single moment of your life." I didn't know then how short that life would be, or how that promise would be tested in the most painful way imaginable. My daughter Lily came into the world 6 weeks early, a tiny fighter weighing 4 pounds 3 ounces. Her first cry was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard, but she was immediately whisked away to the NICU. Her heart condition was even more severe than the doctors had anticipated, but she was stable enough to avoid immediate surgery. "She's stronger than we expected," the cardiologist told us. "We'll monitor her closely and perform the first surgery when she's a bit bigger." For 6 precious days, I spent every waking moment by her incubator. I sang to her, read stories, and told her about all the adventures we would have when she came home. Troy brought me food and fresh clothes, supporting me completely while splitting his time between the hospital and his job. On the 7th day, while I was holding Lily during a brief period when the nurses allowed her out of the incubator, her tiny body suddenly went limp. Alarms blared as medical staff rushed in, taking her from my arms and working frantically to stabilize her. I stood frozen in the corner, watching as they performed CPR on her impossibly small chest. After 43 minutes, the doctor looked at the clock and called it time of death, 3:47 p.m. The world stopped. Everything around me blurred as I collapsed into Troy's arms, screaming until my voice gave out. They eventually let us hold her one last time, her perfect little body now still and growing cold. We memorized every feature, her button nose, rosebud lips, and the tiny dimple in her right cheek. Through my fog of grief, I called my parents. My mother answered on the 4th ring. "Mom," I choked out, "Lily died. My baby died today." There was a pause. "Oh, Bertie, I'm so sorry to hear that." Her voice was flat, emotionless. No crying, no gasping, no rush of questions or offers to come immediately. Just empty words. "The funeral will be on Saturday," I managed to say. "We're keeping it small, just family." "This Saturday?" "Oh, Bertie, that's the day of Doug's pool party. We've been planning it for months." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, my daughter died. Your granddaughter died. I'm telling you when her funeral is. Can't you move it to Sunday? Or next week? Doug has invited all his colleagues, and your father and I are hosting." I hung up without answering, too stunned to form words. The next day brought more devastating news. Troy's mother had suffered a severe stroke in Florida and wasn't expected to survive. Troy was torn, his face contorted with an impossible choice. "Go," I told him, though it broke my heart. "Your mom needs you. I can handle the funeral arrangements." "Are you sure?" he asked, eyes brimming with tears. "I can stay. I should stay. Your mother is still alive. Go be with her. My parents will help me." Even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. After Troy left for Florida, I threw myself into planning Lily's funeral. The funeral home director was kind, helping me select a tiny white casket and suggesting a simple service. I chose a small teddy bear to be buried with her, and a white dress with tiny pink roses. The day before the funeral, I called my parents again, hoping they'd reconsidered. "We've thought about it," my father said, "and we really can't miss Doug's party. He's invited his boss and several potential clients. It's important for his career." "And my daughter's funeral isn't important?" I asked, voice breaking. "Bertie, try to be reasonable. It's not like you knew her. It was just a week. Doug has been planning this party for months." I hung up, numb with disbelief. That evening, as I sat alone in Lily's nursery, my phone chimed with a text from my mother. It's just a baby, Bertie. Your brother's party matters more right now. You can always have another. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then threw my phone against the wall, watching as it shattered like my heart. The morning of Lily's funeral dawned bright and clear, a beautiful day that felt like a cruel joke. I drove to the funeral home alone, clutching the small urn necklace that would hold a portion of Lily's ashes, the rest to be buried. The service was brief, attended by a handful of friends, Troy's sister who lived nearby, and some neighbors. My parents' absence was a physical ache, a space that couldn't be filled. As I stood by the tiny grave, placing a single white rose on the casket, my phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it until the service concluded. When I finally checked, I found a series of notifications from social media. A mutual friend had been tagged in photos from Doug's pool party. There were my parents, smiling broadly, champagne glasses raised in a toast. My mother wore a new floral dress, my father, his favorite golf shirt. They didn't look somber or conflicted. They looked jubilant. Something inside me broke in that moment. Standing alone at my daughter's grave, watching as cemetery workers prepared to lower her into the ground, I made a decision. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something new, a version of myself that my parents wouldn't recognize, a version that would make them regret the choice they made today for the rest of their lives. The weeks after Lily's funeral passed in a blur of grief and emptiness. Troy returned from Florida. His mother had survived, but faced a long recovery and found me a shell of myself. I could barely eat or sleep. The nursery door remained closed, a room frozen in time and hope. I couldn't even bury our daughter properly, I told Troy one night, curled against him in bed. My own parents thought a pool party was more important than her funeral. Troy's jaw tightened. What they did was unforgivable, Bertie. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. It's not your fault. Your mother needed you. I paused. But my parents, they didn't even call afterward to ask how I was doing. My parents acted as if nothing significant had happened. My mother sent a generic thinking of you card that could have been for a minor illness rather than the death of a child. When they called, they talked about Doug's successful party, neighborhood gossip, and the weather, never mentioning Lily or acknowledging my grief. 3 weeks after the funeral, I started seeing Dr. Maxwell, a therapist specializing in grief and family trauma. In her comfortable office with soft blue walls, I gradually began to process not just Lily's death but the lifetime of emotional neglect from my parents. What you're describing is a classic golden child divided by scapegoat dynamic, Dr. Maxwell explained during one session. Your brother is the golden child who can do no wrong, while you're the scapegoat who can never measure up, regardless of your achievements. But why? I asked, voice breaking. What did I do wrong? Nothing. This has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with your parents' dysfunction. Sometimes parents project their own insecurities onto one child while using another to validate their self-worth. Her words were simultaneously devastating and liberating. For the first time, I began to see that the problem wasn't me, it never had been. In my 4th month of grief, I decided to clear out some of my own childhood memorabilia from our attic, hoping to find comfort in happier memories. Among dusty boxes of school projects and yearbooks, I discovered a file of documents that belonged to my grandfather Jack, my father's father. Grandpa Jack had been the one person in the family who'd shown me consistent love and attention before his death when I was 15. As I leafed through the papers, mostly old tax documents and letters, a formal-looking legal document caught my eye. It was my grandfather's will. Curious, I began reading, and my heart started racing when I came to a specific section. To my beloved granddaughter, Roberta Jean Walker, now Carter, I leave my lake house property at 1,487 Blue Heron Drive, including all structures and the surrounding 20 acres, with the hope that she will find as much peace there as I have. I sat back, stunned. The lake house was a beautiful property on Lake Allatoona where we'd spent summers during my childhood. After Grandpa Jack died, my parents had moved into it as their primary residence, renovating it extensively. They'd always told me that Grandpa had left it to my father. The will was dated just 3 months before Grandpa Jack's death and appeared to be properly notarized and witnessed. I spent the rest of the day searching through the file, finding correspondence between my grandfather and his attorney that confirmed his intention to leave the lake house to me, not my father. The next morning, I called a local attorney, Amanda Reeves, and scheduled a consultation. Based on the documents you've shown me, Amanda said after reviewing the will, it appears that your grandfather intended for you to inherit the lake house property. However, we need to investigate whether this will was properly executed and filed with the probate court. Over the next 2 weeks, Amanda's investigation revealed a shocking truth. The will had never been properly filed. Instead, an older will, leaving everything to my father, had been submitted to probate. Property records showed that my parents had been taking out equity loans against the property for years, using the money to fund home improvements, trips, and I discovered with bitter irony contributing to Doug's down payment on his house and financing his pool installation. In my professional opinion, Amanda told me during a follow-up meeting, you have a strong claim to the property. The will you found appears legitimate, and there's a compelling case that the older will was superseded. However, litigation would be complicated, especially after all these years. I sat in her office, turning my wedding ring around my finger as I considered my options. What if I approached them directly with this information? That's certainly an option. Sometimes the threat of litigation is enough to bring parties to the negotiating table. That night, I shared everything with Troy. He listened intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. This is huge, Bertie. The lake house must be worth well over $1 million. At least. The property values in that area have skyrocketed. How do you want to handle this? He asked, taking my hands in his. I thought about it for a long moment. I need to know more before I confront them. Something feels off about all this. The next day, I drove to the county records office and requested all documents related to the property. What I found was disturbing. There were multiple mortgage documents, home equity loans, and liens against the property. My parents had been treating the lake house like a personal ATM for years, extracting hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity. But the most shocking discovery came when I found a document from 8 years ago with Doug's signature on it. He had co-signed one of the larger equity loans, which meant he knew about the financial situation. Further digging revealed emails between Doug and my father discussing keeping Bertie in the dark about the property arrangements. My own brother had been complicit in hiding my inheritance from me for years. The same brother whose pool party was more important than my daughter's funeral. That night, I sat in Lily's nursery for the first time since her death, rocking slowly in the chair where I'd imagined holding her. A strange calm settled over me as pieces fell into place. My entire adult life, I'd been struggling financially, draining my savings for fertility treatments, taking on medical debt while my inheritance sat in my parents' possession, being used to fund their lifestyle and Doug's ambitions. I won't let them get away with this, I whispered to Lily's memory. Not anymore. For days after discovering the truth about the lake house, I cycled through rage, heartbreak, and a cold determination. Troy worried about me, especially when he found me awake at 3 a.m, spreadsheets of financial documents spread across our dining room table. This isn't healthy, Bertie, he said gently. I'm worried about you. I need to understand everything before I make my move, I replied, not looking up from the papers. Make your move? This isn't a chess game. These are your parents. I finally looked up at him, my vision clear for the first time in months. Parents who skipped their granddaughter's funeral for a pool party. Parents who stole my inheritance and gave part of it to my brother. Parents who've dismissed me my entire life. Troy sat beside me, taking my hand. I know they've hurt you terribly, but what are you planning to do? It was a fair question. My initial impulse had been pure revenge to take the lake house, evict them immediately, and leave them scrambling. But as days passed, a different vision began forming in my mind. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. But I know I don't want to become like them. The next day, I met with a real estate developer who specialized in property conversions. The location is prime, Marcus Johnson told me after reviewing the property details. 20 acres on Lake Allatoona with an existing structure? You could do almost anything with it, luxury vacation rentals, a small retreat center, even subdivide for additional homes. What about a retreat center for a specific purpose? I asked. Something that would require renovations to the existing structure but maintain most of the natural setting? Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Definitely doable. What did you have in mind? I took a deep breath. A retreat for parents who have lost children. A place for healing with accommodations for families, therapy spaces, gardens, something beautiful and peaceful. His expression softened. I'm very sorry for your loss. That's a wonderful vision. We could definitely work with that concept. Later that week, I contacted Peaceful Passages, an organization supporting bereaved parents that had reached out to me after Lily's death. I spoke with their director, Sarah Hendricks, about my idea. What you're proposing could help so many families, Sarah said, her voice warm with enthusiasm. We've dreamed of having a dedicated retreat space, but funding has always been the obstacle. I might be able to solve that problem, I replied, but there are some complicated family matters to resolve first. As my plan took shape, I realized I needed to document the history of my parents' behavior. I started journaling, recording specific incidents of favoritism and emotional neglect from my childhood to the present. I gathered evidence of their financial maneuvers with the property. I even recorded conversations with family friends who had witnessed their behavior firsthand. One afternoon, my phone rang with Doug's number. We hadn't spoken since before Lily's funeral. He hadn't even sent a text of condolence. "Bertie, hey," he said casually, as if nothing had happened. "Mom mentioned you've been acting weird. Everything okay?" "Acting weird? What does that mean?" "You know, not returning calls, asking strange questions about Grandpa Jack. They're worried about you." My heart raced as I realized my parents had noticed my investigation. I'm still grieving my daughter, Doug, the daughter whose funeral you and our parents skipped for your pool party. There was an uncomfortable pause. Look, that was unfortunate timing. We all felt bad about it. Bad enough to call or send flowers or check on me afterward? Because none of you did that. You're being dramatic. It's been months. You need to move on. For the first time in my life, I didn't back down from Doug's dismissiveness. Move on? Like you've all moved on from hiding Grandpa's will from me? The one leaving me the lake house? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. When Doug spoke again, his voice had a nervous edge. "I don't know what you think you found, but that property has been in Dad's name for years. Whatever you're planning, it won't work. We'll see about that. Goodbye, Doug." As I hung up, I felt a strange lightness. Standing up to Doug had been surprisingly easy, nothing like the frightened acquiescence I'd shown my entire life. That weekend, something unexpected happened. Tracy Wilson, a cousin from my mother's side who'd attended Lily's funeral, invited me for coffee. "I've been thinking about you," Tracy said as we sat in a quiet corner of the cafe, "and about what happened with the funeral." I stiffened, preparing for the usual family defense of my parents' actions. "What your parents did was cruel, Bertie. Unforgivable, really. And it's not the first time they've treated you badly." Tears sprang to my eyes at this rare acknowledgement. "Thank you for saying that." Tracy reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "More of us have noticed than you realize. For years, we've watched how they favor Doug, but no one wanted to interfere in your parents' parenting style." She made air quotes around the phrase. But missing Lily's funeral crossed a line for many of us. As we talked, Tracy revealed that several family members had been discussing my parents' behavior, especially after my mother had made insensitive comments about my overreaction to their absence at the funeral. "She told Aunt Judy that you deliberately scheduled the funeral on the same day as Doug's party to cause drama," Tracy said, looking disgusted. "We all know that's not true." I sat back, stunned by this new information. "She's telling people I used my daughter's death to create drama?" Tracy nodded grimly. That's when several of us decided we couldn't stay silent anymore. "Whatever you need, I'm here for you. So are others." As Tracy and I parted with a hug, I realized my situation was changing. I wasn't alone anymore. And with that knowledge, my plan transformed from a solitary mission into something greater, a chance not just for personal justice, but for reshaping a broken family system that had hurt more people than just me. 3 months to the day after Lily's funeral, I sent a formal letter to my parents. The contents were simple: documentation of my grandfather's will, proof of their fraudulent handling of the property, and a notice that I was asserting my legal ownership of the lake house. I gave them 30 days to respond before I would pursue legal action. 3 days later, my parents showed up unannounced at my front door. My mother's face was blotchy from crying, my father's expression thunderous. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, waving the letter as I let them into the living room. "I think the letter is quite clear," I replied calmly. gesturing for them to sit. Troy stood by my side, a solid presence of support. "This is preposterous," my father continued. "That property has been in my name for 15 years. Your grandfather left it to me." "No, he didn't. He left it to me, and you knew it. You submitted an outdated will to probate and have been living in my house, borrowing against my property, ever since." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "How can you do this to us? After everything we've done for you? What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Skip my daughter's funeral? Tell family members I used her death to create drama? Use my inheritance to fund Doug's lifestyle?" "That's not fair," my father interjected. "We've always treated you and Doug equally." I laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "Do you actually believe that? You've favored Doug my entire life. When I needed you most when I was burying my child, you chose a pool party over supporting me." "It wasn't just a pool party," my mother protested. "It was an important networking event for Doug's career." "And my daughter's funeral wasn't important? She was your granddaughter." An uncomfortable silence fell. Troy squeezed my shoulder gently. "What exactly do you want?" my father finally asked, his voice hard. "I want what's legally mine. The lake house and property. I'm willing to negotiate a reasonable time frame for you to relocate, but the property will be transferred to my name immediately." My parents exchanged alarmed looks. "We can't just leave," my mother said. "That's our home. Where would we go?" "You have options. Your savings, Doug's guest house, the condo in Florida. You're not destitute." My father's face flushed with anger. "This is about punishing us for missing the funeral, isn't it? You're being vindictive." "No, Dad. This is about justice. You took something that was legally mine and hid it from me for 15 years. You used my inheritance while I struggled financially, went into debt for fertility treatments, and faced the worst loss imaginable without your support. We'll fight this," my father threatened. "We'll get the best lawyers. You're welcome to try. But the will is clear, and I have evidence that you knowingly concealed it. I'm also prepared to make this very public if necessary." As they left, my mother turned back, tears streaming down her face. "Please reconsider, Bertie. We're your parents. We love you." It was the first time in years I'd heard her say those words, and they rang hollow. The next day, my phone exploded with messages from extended family. My parents had wasted no time sharing their version of events that I was trying to steal their home in revenge for a simple scheduling conflict. Some relatives sided with them immediately. Others reached out to hear my side. I decided to host a small gathering for those who wanted the truth. Tracy came, along with my father's brother, Uncle Paul, 2 cousins, and my mother's sister, Aunt Martha. I shared the will, the financial documents, and finally, the text message about Lily's funeral. "It's just a baby, Bertie. Your brother's party matters more right now." The room fell silent as they read the words on my phone. "Janet actually wrote that?" Aunt Martha whispered, her face pale. I nodded. I knew they favored Doug, but this... Uncle Paul shook his head, visibly disturbed. Aunt Martha reached for my hand. "There's something you should know, Bertie. This isn't the first time your mother has done something like this." Everyone turned to look at her. "When your mother and I were young, our little sister Emma died of leukemia. Your mother refused to visit her in the hospital because she had a dance recital. She told our parents that Emma wouldn't know the difference anyway. I've never forgotten it." I stared at my aunt, a piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Mom had a sister who died? She never told me. "Janet doesn't like to acknowledge painful things," Aunt Martha said sadly. "She pretends they don't exist rather than dealing with them. I thought she'd changed over the years, but apparently not." The revelation about my mother's past added a new dimension to my understanding. Her coldness toward Lily's death wasn't just favoritism toward Doug, it was part of a pattern that stretched back decades. A week after my confrontation with my parents, Doug appeared at my office as I was leaving work. "We need to talk," he said, blocking my path to my car. "I have nothing to say to you. Look, this has gone far enough. You're tearing the family apart over ancient history." I studied my brother's face, the familiar features that had always been arranged in an expression of superiority when looking at me. "This isn't ancient history, Doug. This is about what happened 3 months ago and what's been happening my entire life. So Mom and Dad missed the funeral. It was a mistake. People make mistakes. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice A choice that revealed exactly how little they value me, how little they valued my daughter. Doug's expression hardened. You've always been so dramatic. Always the victim. And you've always been the golden child. Must be nice to be the favorite. Is that what this is about? Some childish jealousy? Grow up, Bertie. I have grown up. That's why I'm finally standing up for myself. Doug stepped closer, lowering his voice. If you go through with this, you'll regret it. Mom and Dad will never forgive you. Neither will I. For the first time, his intimidation tactics failed to work. I already regret not standing up to all of you sooner. As I drove home, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Is this Bertie? A woman's voice asked hesitantly. Yes, who's this? It's Jessica, Doug's girlfriend. She paused. I need to talk to you. In person, it's important. We met at a coffee shop across town. Jessica looked nervous, constantly checking the door as if afraid Doug might appear. Doug doesn't know I'm meeting you, she said, clutching her coffee cup. He'd be furious. Why are you here, Jessica? She took a deep breath. Because what your parents did to you was wrong. Skipping your baby's funeral was cruel. And now Doug is pressuring them to fight you on the lake house, even though he knows they're in the wrong. How do you know they're in the wrong? Because Doug told me. Years ago, when we first started dating, he bragged about how your grandfather left you the lake house, but your parents managed to fix the situation. He thought it was funny. My stomach churned at this confirmation. There's more, Jessica continued. Doug, he's not who he pretends to be. He's controlling, manipulative. He monitors my phone, my spending, my friends. When I saw how he and your parents treated you, I realized this isn't normal. It's not healthy. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm so sorry, Jessica. You deserve better. Tears filled her eyes. So do you, Bertie. So did your little girl. As Jessica and I parted, she hugged me tightly. I'm thinking of leaving him, she whispered, but I'm scared. When you're ready, call me. I'll help you. Driving home, I realized something important had shifted. This wasn't just about reclaiming my inheritance anymore. It wasn't even about justice for how my parents had treated me. It was about breaking a cycle of toxicity that affected everyone in its path, even those who seemed to benefit from it, like Doug and Jessica. By the third week after sending the formal notice, it became clear my parents had no intention of resolving the matter amicably. Their attorney sent a combative response, threatening counteraction and accusing me of elder abuse for attempting to evict senior citizens from their long-established home. Amanda, my attorney, was undeterred. This is exactly what I expected. They're posturing, hoping to intimidate you into backing down. I won't back down, I said firmly. Not this time. We filed the necessary legal paperwork to establish my claim to the property and scheduled a mediation session. Meanwhile, I moved forward with plans for the retreat center, working with Marcus Johnson on preliminary designs and meeting with Sarah from Peaceful Passages to refine the concept. We're thinking of calling it Lily's Haven, I told Sarah during one of our planning sessions, a place where grieving parents can find peace and healing. It's beautiful, Bertie. Turning your pain into something that will help others, that's true healing. Troy and I visited the property one afternoon, parking down the road and walking along the public lakefront to view it from a distance. The house was impressive, a sprawling cedar and stone structure nestled among tall pines, with a private dock extending into the clear blue water. I used to love coming here as a kid, I told Troy as we stood on the shore. It was the one place where I felt peaceful. Grandpa Jack would take me fishing, just the two of us. He'd tell me I was special, that I had gifts no one else in the family had. Troy put his arm around me. He saw the real you. Yes, he did. And he wanted me to have this place because he knew how much it meant to me. Are you ready for the fight ahead? Your parents won't give up easily. I nodded, watching a pair of ospreys circling above the lake. I'm ready. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I'm fighting for. The next day, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was tearful, desperate. Bertie, please. Your father's had chest pains. The doctor says it's stress-related. You're killing him with this lawsuit. My heart stuttered with momentary panic before I recognized the manipulation tactic. If Dad is having medical issues, he should follow his doctor's advice. But emotional manipulation won't work anymore, Mom. How can you be so cold? We're your parents. Where was this concern when I was burying my daughter alone? The line went silent for a moment. We've apologized for that. What more do you want? You haven't apologized. Not once. You've justified, minimized, and blamed me, but you haven't apologized. Another pause. Well, I'm sorry you felt abandoned. That's not an apology. That's putting the responsibility on me for my feelings rather than on you for your actions. I don't know what you want from me, Bertie. I want you to understand what you did. I want you to feel a fraction of the pain I felt standing at that tiny grave alone. But I don't think you're capable of that kind of empathy, Mom. Not for me. After hanging up, I sat in Lily's nursery, rocking slowly in the chair, something I'd begun doing more often as a way to feel connected to her. The room no longer felt like a shrine to grief, but a quiet space for reflection. I'd removed the crib but kept the rocking chair and a small bookshelf filled with the books I'd planned to read to her. I'm finding my strength, little one, I whispered. The strength I would have taught you to have. 2 days later, I was working from home when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Doug standing on my porch. I hesitated, then opened the door but didn't invite him in. Can we talk? He asked, his expression uncharacteristically humble. I've been thinking about everything. Reluctantly, I led him into the living room. He sat on the edge of the sofa, looking around as if seeing my home for the first time. I've realized I haven't been a good brother to you, he began. The way Mom and Dad treated you treated us differently. I should have stood up for you more. The words sounded rehearsed, but I let him continue. And missing Lily's funeral was wrong. I should have been there for you. I'm sorry, truly. For a brief moment, hope flickered in my chest. Was this genuine remorse? Maybe we can find a compromise on the lake house, Doug continued, something that works for everyone. Mom and Dad could stay in the main house, and you could build something on part of the property. I shook my head slowly. That's not going to work, Doug. The property is legally mine. I already have plans for it. What plans? I'm creating a retreat for parents who've lost children. Doug frowned. That's admirable. But is it really the best use of such valuable real estate? Think about it financially. I am thinking about it, just not in terms of money. Doug shifted uncomfortably, then reached into his pocket. Listen, I recorded a message from Mom and Dad for you. They're too upset to come themselves, but they wanted you to hear this. He placed his phone on the coffee table and pressed play. My parents' voices came through, expressing regret and asking for reconciliation. As the recording played, I noticed Doug subtly positioning his phone to capture my reaction. With sudden clarity, I understood. You're recording this conversation, aren't you? Hoping I'll say something you can use against me legally. Doug's expression confirmed my suspicion before he could deny it. I stood up. Get out of my house, now. Bertie, you're being paranoid. Am I? Empty your pockets then? Doug's face flushed. He stood up, grabbing his phone. This is exactly why Mom and Dad get frustrated with you. You're impossible to reason with. After he left, I called Amanda and told her what had happened. He was trying to entrap me into saying something they could use in court. Sadly, I'm not surprised, she replied. But it shows they're getting desperate. Our case is strong and they know it. The following week, I participated in a panel discussion at a community center where I volunteered, speaking about child loss and family support. Afterward, the center director approached me. We'd like to honor you at our annual fundraiser, she said. Your work supporting other bereaved parents has been inspiring, especially given your own recent loss. I don't need recognition, I protested. It's not just about recognition. Your story has helped others feel less alone. That deserves to be celebrated. As word spread about the award and my plans for Lily's Haven, more people reached out, friends, acquaintances, even strangers who'd heard about my project through Sarah's organization. A local business owner offered to donate furnishings for the retreat. A landscape architect volunteered to design memorial gardens. A contractor with experience building therapeutic spaces offered discounted services. What had begun as a personal quest for justice was evolving into a community mission. For the first time since Lily's death, I felt a sense of purpose larger than my grief, a legacy worthy of my daughter's brief but profound impact on my life. The night before the scheduled mediation with my parents, my phone rang with my mother's number. I answered cautiously. Bertie, your father's in the hospital. He's had a heart attack. You need to come now. My throat tightened with fear. Which hospital? North Fulton. Please hurry. I called Troy, who was working late, then drove to the hospital, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios despite my suspicions. At the hospital, I asked for Richard Walker at the reception desk. I'm sorry, we don't have a patient by that name, the receptionist said after checking her computer. He would have been admitted within the last few hours. Heart attack. She shook her head. No one with that name has been admitted today. A cold realization washed over me. I'd been tricked into coming to the hospital likely so my parents could have unimpeded access to my house. I called Troy immediately. Check the security cameras, I said, hurrying back to my car. I think my parents are trying to break in. Troy called back 5 minutes later. You were right. Your parents and Doug just pulled up. They're at the front door. Call the police. I'm on my way. By the time I arrived home, a police car was in the driveway. The officer was speaking with my parents and Doug while Troy stood in the doorway. Mrs. Carter, the officer said as I approached, your family says they were concerned about your mental health and came to check on you. That's a lie. They lured me to the hospital with a false emergency so they could enter my home without permission. I have the phone call recorded on my cell phone. The officer reviewed the recording, his expression growing stern as he heard my mother's fabricated emergency. Filing a false police report is a serious offense, he told my parents. So is attempting to gain unauthorized entry to someone's home through deception. We were worried about our daughter, my father insisted. She's been acting irrationally since losing her baby. The casual cruelty of his dismissal of Lily, her baby, rather than their granddaughter, his tone suggesting my grief was an overreaction, was the final confirmation I needed. Officer, I want to press charges, I said quietly, and I want a restraining order. As the police escorted my family off the property, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for what could have been, and a strengthened resolve to create something beautiful from so much pain. 6 months after my confrontation with my parents, the legal battle concluded with a settlement. My ownership of the lake house and property was confirmed, and my parents were given 90 days to vacate. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue additional claims regarding their misuse of the property's equity over the years. The day they moved out was somber. I stood at the end of the driveway, watching as movers loaded their possessions into trucks bound for their Florida condo. My mother approached me, her face lined with a new weariness. I never thought it would end this way, she said softly. Neither did I, Mom. Will you ever forgive us? I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness isn't something I can just give you on demand. It's a process, and it requires genuine understanding of the harm caused. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About Lily's funeral. About everything. For the first time, her words sounded sincere. That's a start, I replied. My father remained in the car, unwilling or unable to face me. Doug had distanced himself after the failed break, in attempt, facing his own reckoning when Jessica finally left him, citing his controlling behavior and complicity in the scheme against me. Once my parents vacated, renovation on the lake house began immediately. The spacious main floor was reconfigured to create therapeutic spaces, a communal dining area, and a library filled with resources on grief and healing. The upper floor was divided into comfortable guest suites for visiting families. A separate carriage house was converted into a residence for a full-time caretaker. In the area where the lawn sloped gently toward the lake, we created Lily's Garden, a peaceful space with winding paths, benches for reflection, and a central memorial fountain. At its heart stood a sculpture of a mother cradling an infant, surrounded by lilies. Through it all, Troy remained my rock, supporting the project wholeheartedly while ensuring I took time for my own healing. Dr. Maxwell continued to guide me through the complex emotions of grief, justice, and family reconciliation. 8 months after gaining possession of the property, Lily's Haven was ready to welcome its first guests. We planned a small opening ceremony, inviting supporters, volunteers, and a few bereaved families who would be the first to experience the retreat. The morning of the ceremony, I stood on the deck overlooking the lake, the May sunshine dancing on the water. Troy joined me, wrapping his arms around me from behind and resting his chin on my shoulder. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Nervous, excited, sad, proud. All of it at once. Lily would be proud of you," I know I am. I turned to face him, taking his hands in mine. I have something to tell you. His expression grew concerned. Everything okay? I placed his hand on my abdomen, still flat but harboring our secret. I'm pregnant, 10 weeks. His eyes widened, then filled with tears. Are you serious? When did you find out? Last week. I wanted to be sure before I told you. Joy and fear battled on his face, the same emotions coursing through me. Is the baby. Healthy so far, no signs of any heart issues, but I'll be monitored closely throughout. Troy pulled me into a gentle embrace. Another chance, he whispered against my hair. Not a replacement, I said firmly. A sibling. Lily will always be our firstborn. Always, he agreed. The opening ceremony for Lily's Haven exceeded my expectations. Sarah from Peaceful Passages cut the ribbon, and Tracy, who had become a dear friend, read a poem about healing. Uncle Paul and Aunt Martha attended, along with several cousins who had supported me throughout the ordeal. To my surprise, my parents arrived just as the ceremony was beginning. They stood at the back, tentative and subdued. When our eyes met across the crowd, my mother gave a small, uncertain wave. I nodded in acknowledgement, neither welcoming nor rejecting their presence. After the formal remarks, guests explored the grounds while volunteers served refreshments on the lakeside patio. As I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and sharing the vision for the retreat, I noticed my parents standing alone near Lily's garden. Following an impulse I didn't fully understand, I approached them. Thank you for coming, I said simply. My father, looking older and smaller than I remembered, cleared his throat. It's impressive, what you've done here. Would you like a tour? They nodded, and I led them through the facilities, explaining how each space would serve families in grief. When we reached the small chapel, my mother touched my arm. We've been in therapy, she said abruptly. Both of us. After everything that happened. I raised my eyebrows, genuinely surprised. It's been illuminating, my father added, looking uncomfortable but determined. We've learned some difficult truths about ourselves, about how we treated you. It's a start, I replied, echoing my words from months earlier. We'd like to be part of your life again, my mother said, if you'll let us. On your terms? I considered their request, feeling neither the desperate need for approval that had driven me for decades, nor the bitter anger that had followed Lily's funeral. Instead, I felt a calm certainty about my boundaries. I'm pregnant, I told them. Their faces registered shock, then cautious joy. That's wonderful news, my mother said softly. If you want to be grandparents to this child, things will have to be different. Completely different. We'll need family therapy, clear boundaries, and time. They exchanged glances, then nodded. We'd like that, my father said. A chance to do better. As the day drew to a close, I stood at the podium one last time to address the remaining guests. The setting sun cast a golden glow across the lake, illuminating the memorial garden where Lily's spirit felt so present. Today marks not just the opening of a refuge for grieving parents, but a testament to the power of transformation, I began. A year ago, I stood alone at my daughter's grave, broken by loss and betrayal. I could never have imagined finding purpose in such pain, or community in such isolation. I paused, looking out at the faces watching me, Troy, our friends, family members both supportive and challenging, and the parents who would be the first to benefit from Lily's Haven. What I've learned through this journey is that healing isn't about erasing pain but transforming it. It isn't about forgetting but remembering with love rather than anguish. It isn't about revenge but justice. Not just for ourselves, but for all who suffer similar wounds. I rested my hand lightly on my abdomen, thinking of the new life growing there, a symbol of hope but never a replacement. Lily lived for only 7 days, but her impact will last for generations through this place of healing. And the lessons her brief life taught me about love, resilience, and the courage to stand up for what's right will guide me forever. From the back of the crowd, I saw my parents listening intently, my mother wiping tears from her eyes. Our relationship remained fragile, the future uncertain, but a door had opened that I once thought permanently closed. As you leave today, I ask you to consider, how might your own pain become purpose? How might your grief become a gift to others? And how might the most devastating loss become the foundation for your greatest strength? The question hung in the air as the ceremony concluded, guests departing with quiet conversations and thoughtful expressions. Troy joined me by the lake as twilight descended, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "You did it," he said, pride evident in his voice. "We did it," I corrected, leaning against him. "And we're just beginning." That night, as Troy slept beside me in our new caretaker's cottage on the property, I stood at the window overlooking the garden. A gentle breeze stirred the chimes hanging from a nearby tree, creating a soft, musical sound. "I kept my promise, Lily," I whispered. "You were loved every moment of your life. And because of you, many others will feel less alone in their darkest hours." In the moonlight reflecting off the lake, I felt a profound peace settle over me. The journey had been brutal, marked by loss, betrayal, and hard-won justice. But standing there, one hand on my growing belly, and my heart full of Lily's memory, I knew that the path ahead held healing not just for me, but for all who would find refuge in this place, born from both pain and love. Have you ever had to transform a painful experience into something meaningful? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be struggling with family relationships or grief. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope you find healing in your own life, whatever challenges you may face.